Have you ever been there? You're facing a big decision, and your brain, your logic, is telling you to go one way, but you've got this deeper feeling, maybe even a sense of divine guidance, pulling you in a completely different direction. Well, today, we're diving into a powerful story all about that exact conflict. It's all about how God's wisdom guides us.
So let's jump right in. Our story starts with this absolutely chilling warning from the Bible. In Acts chapter 27, the Apostle Paul, who's actually a prisoner on this ship, stands up and says this. And you got to understand, this isn't just a bad weather forecast. This is a life-or-death prophecy. He sees total catastrophe ahead.
And this really sets up the core question for us, doesn't it? When a storm is brewing and the stakes are as high as they can get, what do you trust? Do you go with the experts and the path of least resistance, or do you listen to a warning that seems to be coming from God himself? The choice they made, well, let's see how that turned out.
Okay, so to really get the weight of this decision, we've got to picture the scene. This is no pleasure cruise. Paul is a prisoner, and he's being hauled off by a Roman centurion to stand trial in Italy. We're talking about a high-stakes prisoner transport across the Mediterranean, which was known for being super treacherous.
You know, the crazy thing is, this trip was a total mess from the very beginning. It was anything but smooth. There were fighting winds that were blowing against them, they had to switch ships partway through, they were basically just limping from one port to the next. So the tension was already sky high long before Paul ever gave his warning.
And this is what brings them to this make-or-break moment. They finally pull into a harbor that's ironically named Fair Havens. But here's the catch. The season for safe sailing is pretty much over. They're way behind schedule, the weather's turning nasty, and now they have to decide. Do they stay put in a harbor that's not great for wintering, or do they risk everything and try to push on?
And right here, this is the pivotal moment. While everyone is debating what to do, this totally unlikely voice speaks up. It's Paul, the prisoner. He's not a sailor, he's not a captain, but he steps up with this incredibly clear and urgent message from God about what lies ahead.
So you can see the two paths laid out crystal clear. On one side, you have Paul's warning, which comes straight from divine wisdom. It's a tough message. He's predicting total disaster, and the advice is simple. Do the safe thing, even though it's inconvenient, and just stay put. On the other side, you've got human logic. The professional sailors, the ship's owner, pretty much everyone, they all want a better, more comfortable place to stay. Theirs is the convenient choice.
So, what happens? The Roman centurion, the guy in charge, he makes the call. He listens to the experts, the pilot and the ship's owner, and he completely dismisses the warning from this prisoner. The majority wins. They choose comfort and convenience over caution, and they set sail.
So, what can we actually pull from this terrible decision? Well, the first huge lesson is about the danger of drifting. This story just perfectly illustrates a deep spiritual truth. When we plug our ears and refuse to listen to God's voice, it's so easy to just drift right into disaster. And why should this ancient story matter to you and me today? Because we face this same choice all the time, don't we? When we put our own comfort, our gut feelings, or what just seems logical ahead of the clear guidance in God's Word, we're setting a course for trouble. And it's often trouble that was completely avoidable. We start to drift. So how do we keep ourselves from drifting like that? Here are 4 really practical things. First, we have to let the Bible actually shape our decisions, not just use it to back up what we already want. Second, just pause, pray, especially before you take a big step that looks a little too easy. Third, learn to seek godly correction from others as a form of protection, not a personal attack. And finally, be that friend who helps others slow down and really listen before they make a big jump.
And that leads us right into a second really crucial lesson from their mistake. The temptation of the easy way out. It's that classic battle we all feel, right? That constant pull between what true faith requires and what our comfort craves.
Here's the core principle. Following God often means choosing the path with more resistance. I mean, think about it. The crew chose what they thought was a more suitable harbor, not because it was safer, they had been warned it wasn't, but just because it was more comfortable. Obedience can feel hard, it can feel slow, it can definitely feel unpopular, but it is always, always the safer harbor.
So how do we actually choose this harder path in our own lives? First, we have to be willing to obey even when it costs us something. We have to actively fight that temptation to trade long-term faithfulness for a quick bit of relief.
We can also pray, specifically for the courage to make those tough, obedient choices. And maybe most importantly, we've got to keep our hearts soft and open to God's leading, even when it totally messes up our plans.
All right, so as we bring all this together, let's boil it down to one final powerful takeaway. This whole thing is about more than just avoiding storms. It's about finding our true safety in the harbor of trust.
You know, this story completely reframes what it means to obey God. It's not about being restricted, it's about being protected. It's not about God trying to limit our freedom, it's about Him trying to save us from disaster. True obedience, then, is really just an act of trust. It's that deep-down belief that His wisdom is so much greater than ours, especially when His directions lead us down a path that feels really uncomfortable.
Look, if there's only one thing you take away from our time together, I really hope it's this simple, powerful idea. Trust God's ways. In a world that's just full of conflicting advice and stormy seas, that is the one compass that will always point you toward true safety. So I'll just leave you with this question to think about. Sometime today, just take a quiet moment and ask yourself honestly, where in my life right now is my desire for comfort, for convenience, or for the easy way, possibly blinding me to God's protective wisdom?